Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning for our folks out on the West Coast. Thank you so much for tuning in to our second webinar for the Accelerate R2 Network Challenge. Just a few administrative notes. We are recording this webinar, and we will have that posted up on the website for you to review at a later date. So just keep that in mind. Feel free to send any questions into the chat box there so that everyone can view them, and we will do our best to address those questions at the end of the presentation. All right. So first off, we wanted to kind of level set with the purpose of today's webinar. As many of you know, this was a two-phased application. We had letters of intent due in early January. Many organizations submitted those, and we are now in the second phase, waiting for the full applications, which are due on March 11th. So we wanted to take this time to kind of level set, clarify some questions, address trends that we saw, and kind of reiterate the program intent based on some stakeholder engagement we had and what we saw through those letters of intent. To clarify, we will not be doing a summary overview of the program. If that is what you're interested in, we'd ask that you please view our earlier webinar. You can find that recording at the Accelerate R2 page at the link here. If you just go to eda.gov/OIE/Accelerate R2, and that's where you'll find all the program resources such as the Notice of Funding Opportunity and the webinar recording itself. So for our agenda today, we're going to start off with some welcome and introductions from the team here at EDA, the Economic Development Administration. We are going to level set with some questions that we've received. So we're going to go over the R2 Challenge overview. We're going to talk about some of the industry needs and challenges. We're going to mainly discuss what R2 is and is not, since there were, it seems to be some misperceptions about the program. And then we're going to discuss other network models, some of the desired activities we'd like, and some of the program basics such as funding limits and eligibility and the timeline in front of us. And now I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, the Director of the Office of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, Craig Bracetti.
Hey, thanks, Emily. Real pleasure to join everyone today to talk about some of our favorite work, and it's what we do day in and day out, and which is technology-based economic development. How can we leverage entrepreneurship and technology to create the businesses and the jobs of tomorrow? That's what we do at the Office of Innovation and Entrepreneurship. We have a couple of different grant programs that we manage and some policy initiatives as well. And I mention that because that is our interest in this challenge today. Emily mentioned why we're here, but maybe if I actually flip to the next slide, we can talk a little bit about why not just we are here, but also some of our partners are interested and vested in this program. So I mentioned OIE and the Economic Development Administration and our interest as far as technology-based economic development. Well, FirstNet and NIST, Public Safety Communications Research Lab, have real vested interests in specific types of technologies and how those technologies can enable our first responders and their communications. Again, Emily mentioned our overview webinar already, so we go into this relationship a little bit deeper. The bottom line, this is a partnership between the three agencies, and I think what you need to know today is that all of us are jointly going to be reviewing these proposals and looking for their effectiveness in accomplishing our stated goals for this program, which are in the NOFO and clearly outlined. A bit of a technical point, but I wanted to drive it home because a lot of people have asked us, what is NIST involvement? What is FirstNet's involvement? We're all equal partners in this and have very similar, very aligned interests, but broadly speaking, those are those are the components of the partnership: economic development and technology. I think that's it about this one. I know Emily's going to break us down a little bit more on maybe the national footprint of activity here and why this challenge is important. Great.
Thanks for that, Craig. Wanted to start here before kind of diving into more of the program specifics, just to take a look and highlight the NOAA 2019 annual report to really kind of understand the industry needs and why we find the R2 Network Challenge to be so timely to address those challenges. In 2019, there were 14 weather and climate disaster events with losses that exceeded $1 billion each across the United States. So there were 3 inland flooding events, 8 severe storm events, 2 tropical cyclone events, and 1 wildfire event. 2019 alone experienced an above average year of cost at $45 billion. So that's just to highlight, this challenge is very specifically focused on disaster response and resilience. It comes at a time when it's needed most, and we need this network at a national level. So we'll get into the specifics here in a second. Craig?
Yeah, I think everyone on this call is likely familiar with these taglines or statements already, but as you review these words on this slide, everyone can read. I'd just like to emphasize a couple points. We are looking for a national footprint here, a national strategy that could be accomplished with someone who has strong, deep expertise at a regional or local level, but the plan and proposals should address a strategy that will bring about a national solution here. Proposals, we welcome them from either an individual vertical, like being a response innovation network or a resiliency innovation network, or both. That is absolutely welcome, but the common thread there is we're looking for a national network. We do not have a prescribed preference on who an application should come from or what partners should be joined in this network, other than it supports these desired outcomes, that we're supporting innovation in the response and resiliency verticals. So hopefully that helps clarify some things, and I think we're actually going to drive home a couple more specific points next that Emily can help us with.
All right. So this slide is really, I think, kind of the meat and potatoes of the presentation. If there was one thing to take away from it, if you were confused or unsure about the program, I hope that this clarifies. As I mentioned before, we had many stakeholder engagements through the letter of intent process. I do want to answer a quick question that we just received, which is if you did not submit a letter of intent, you are not precluded from submitting a full application. So if you did not submit a letter of intent, you can submit a full application. I think it's a slight missed opportunity to gather feedback from us. But you are certainly welcome to apply. The full application deadline is March 11th, which we'll cover in a little bit. But through that letter of intent process, we kind of noticed some common themes, some trends, and some misperceptions about the program, and wanted to highlight a few of those here. So what R2 is not. First off, we are not funding a research and development project for disaster response and resilience. This is not a planning grant or a specific research project for your university, perhaps. The intent here is that it's meant to be actionable and impactful, and we want folks to begin executing on building this network from day one. Another common misperception, some of you may know us from our flagship grant program, the Regional Innovation Strategies, also known as RISC. This is not a risk grant, so it is not designated for a specific community or a specific region. This is meant to be, as Craig mentioned, a national network to really bring those regions together. So just want to clarify that. Additionally, this is not for a single technology, right? So we've had some folks submit letters of intent and other ideas that really focus on a singular technology or solution, or it's very focused on procuring response technology for a specific community. Other folks have wondered if this is a technical network instead of a kind of relationship and community network. So just want to clarify, it is not a technical network in nature and not for a specific technology.
Emily, I'd like to add too on the single technology piece. Some folks have talked about maybe the application of a specific technology sector, or I'm trying to think of an example here, like a UAV, UAS, or cybersecurity. Those technologies can be helpful and important in these verticals of response, for sure, absolutely. But we're talking about a broader, diverse ecosystem of technology. So there should be strategies to engage all types of tech commercialization, entrepreneurship, investor assets in these fields.
Great. And lastly, we are not directly funding startups or entrepreneurs or businesses directly. The intent here is to build a network that supports intermediary organizations such as accelerators, incubators, other entrepreneurship support programs, kind of those intermediate organizations that are in a support function for startups and entrepreneurs. So we are not directly funding them. That was another common misperception. So what R2 is? We are trying to build a national network, a national coordination effort to align disaster response and resiliency innovation assets. You can notice that we are very focused on disaster response and resilience specifically. We had some folks who kind of interpreted the words R2, response and resiliency in a myriad of ways. One of them, we got cybersecurity focused, others were about specific response technologies. But at the end of the day, the nexus is really disaster response and resilience and those innovation assets. And lastly, we're trying to build a strategic ecosystem and community, right? To bring together these stakeholders, to build relationships, to convene them, and to share best practices across this community.
And I think what might help drive that last point home is some real concrete examples. So I can't speak to inspiring these ideas. I wish I had. These are some wonderfully effective and important networks that are growing and scaling today. The first right there is the Incubate Energy Network. This was funded through a national challenge run by Department of Energy, I think back around 2013 or 14 or so. And the second one, Department of Defense, national security focused, the National Security Innovation Network is more recent. I think they're about 2 years old now. I think both of these were funded through some slightly different mechanisms, and I think different resources are at hand, of course. So not entirely analogous to this challenge, but I do want to drive home the spirit and strategy behind these two very different networks are absolutely in line with what we're trying to accomplish in the R2 industries. So would encourage you all to go to their websites there and familiarize yourself with what those networks are comprised of, what they've done over the years, how they've scaled. However, I will say we're not trying to prescribe a specific solution. Look at these for inspiration. I am certain that there will be other things, other strategies, and other components that these networks are leveraging that would be important for response and resiliency. So again, a framework, inspiration, but not the solution. I hope these real world real-life examples, help you figure out that final application or final proposal come March.
Awesome. And just to cover a few of the desired outcomes for the R2 challenge. So, we wanted to list out, these are pulled directly from the Notice of Funding Opportunity, so there should be no major surprises here. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir. Many of you have probably seen these before, but I think this is really at the heart of what we want to see come out of this nationwide network, right? We want the ability to coordinate these accelerator and incubator resources that are supporting R2 entrepreneurs, deepen the relationships between these stakeholders, and be able to develop a peer learning network to share resources, and to really strengthen communication and collaboration between them, between the industry, between the R&D that's happening, and between the government, which is a huge, huge industry. And of course, important to us is always the ability to increase commercialization of technology. We are facing, a lot of challenges in this sector, and that is where technologies come in, and we want to be able to increase that market access for these entrepreneurs. And last but not least, serve as an industry liaison and advance these technologies used by the first responders. So I just highly recommend using these as kind of your North Star for if what you're proposing can answer these as outcomes, then you are likely on the right track. A few program basics and requirements we wanted to just reiterate here. We can certainly answer some questions about these if folks have further questions, but you must be an eligible entity to apply. We have a full list of those in the funding opportunity and in the previous webinar. I won't go through the list now, but please give that a look. From the funding perspective, so there are essentially two options. You can opt to do the $1 million challenge for the nationwide R2 network. So that's bringing together both response and resiliency components in the network for a federal funds cap of $1 million, or you can build a specific response network or resilience network for up to $700,000 in federal funds. The important thing to note here is that we do require one-to-one match for this, for both the 1 million and the 700,000, which essentially means that if you're asking for $700,000 in federal funds, you must bring $700,000 of non-federal funds to the table. We have a few very important kind of clarifications here on match. It must be unencumbered, committed, and available at the time of the application. We allow in-kind contributions, so if there are specific services that might get donated in the process of building the network, that is certainly allowable, as long as those are measured at a fair market value. And there is no preference given to cash or in-kind. So we ask that people be thoughtful and develop a holistic budget, but there is no specific preference for how you put together that match.
So let me chime in on the unencumbered, committed, and available point. What that means is we cannot accept future program income, for example. So if part of your strategy is to charge for some services, or you have maybe a licensing strategy, any income that is forecasted in the future cannot be considered as unencumbered and committed, and thus can't be matched. And what that comes down to is we want to see resources outside of just federal resources that are helping this project succeed. And so when we have a matching commitment brought to the table on the start of the project, we have a greater level of confidence that we're going to likely see success here. So it's not just red tape, it's really for the broader strategy to strengthen proposals here.
So where we're at in the timeline, the letters of intent phase has now passed. It is closed. Those were due back in January, and the feedback has already been dispersed to organizations that submitted them. We are now in the full application window, so those are due by March 11th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And after that, we will then put the applications through a technical and merit review. Those are viewed by staff from all of our partners, so here at EDA, FirstNet, and NIST, and then we'll go through the final selection process. So just wanted to reiterate the due date of March 11th is a hard one, and it's fast approaching. A few administrative links here. For folks who haven't taken a look, you know, the NOFO is really the North Star, so, you know, please get on to grants.gov. The funding opportunity is listed here, and then we also have the link to the application package on grants.gov, which is where you will be submitting the full application if interested. And with that, we will open it up to any questions folks have.
We certainly, I've got a question coming in on, are we accepting applications for, as I understand this, for individual verticals? So either one of the R's, and can you pursue the $700,000 level? Absolutely. What part of our evaluation is looking at the collective pool of applications and understanding what is going to be the most compelling investments for us. So there may be an organization that is uniquely suited to do to build a network around both verticals, or maybe it's two separate organizations that we decide to go with, and one for each unique industry, one grant that is, excuse me. So welcoming proposals from all three, I guess, or all three categories, meaning you're doing both response and resilience, you're doing just response, or you're doing just resilience.
And any others with questions, feel free to drop that into the chat box, and we will address them there.
If not, I'll take the opportunity to say this is a national competition, and we try to be as fair as possible with all stakeholders. And if you do have questions following this, we welcome them, but we cannot provide strategic support as far as helping you develop partnerships or evaluating what strategy might be best. We'll have to limit our questions to more administrative, technical questions like the ones we've addressed today. Colby, your question on how will let me just read it out loud. On the budget, are you wanting to see how this will build the network through events, et cetera? Will this be weighted more? This bleeds into strategy. If you look at the NOFO and some of the activities that we've described, we certainly welcome events as part of the growth strategy for a national network, but I will not opine on how much you should do or if that's going to be weighted more, mostly because I can't. I simply can't. I don't know what your organization is. I don't know what your assets are, and I don't know what your needs are going to be to move from point A to point Z to successfully do this. It may be regional events leading up to a national event. I'm not sure. So that's why we don't get into this side of the discussion during a competition phase, because it varies so greatly for every applicant. And I think I'll close my answer with returning the same question back to you. What do you think will be most compelling in a proposal, and how should events be integrated into your strategy, given those needs and assets that you have? I also realized I didn't address the second part of your question, and with that, I will wrap it up for the day unless anyone else has questions. And the second part was our feedback was to spell this out in more detail, so just wondering what you are looking for. I'm assuming by that in feedback you might have been referring to a response you received to a letter of intent. I think the feedback there that was common because the letter of intent tended to be short. So we do ask for a complete and thorough budget in the full application, which the details are outlined in the funding opportunity. So the full application is a much more robust application. This is kind of where the rubber meets the road, and we ask people to have a thorough, thoughtful strategy. So I think that's what we were implying there, to make sure that you do fully think through all the details, the partners and the players, so we can fully understand the budget. Close with that. It looks like no other questions. Emily, anything else to add?
No, I think that covers it. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and we'll have this webinar posted up for your review here shortly. So thank you again for tuning in, and we've listed our contact information at the end of the slides here, so don't hesitate to reach out if there are technical questions that we can help with. Thanks very much.